So we heard our speakers on various topics. The final session is an informal conversation that will have the experts sharing their opinions on scope for value-added services and customization in this sector. The session is being moderated by Mr. Shobhit Agarwal, MD and CEO, Anarock Capital. He's a visionary entrepreneur with professional excellence and experience of over 20 years in real estate investments. At Anarock Capital, Shobhit steers the strategic direction through various investment verticals, and his in-depth knowledge about the sector and deep-rooted relationship with developers and capital providers have resulted in some of the multi-billion-dollar deals. So this is the introduction of our moderator for this session, who will be chairing this discussion. Let me now introduce our speakers of this session in an alphabetical order. Ashish Shah, Head Leasing and Business Development, Logos Property, is a real estate professional with strong leadership skills in managing transactions, clients, and teams. Ashish Shah has over a decade of consulting experience in Big Four firms and has worked with premier developers in Mumbai for 12 years and has been involved as interim management and transaction advisor for institutions and developers. Our next eminent panel member is Mr. Mitesh Kaul, Country Head, Integrated Services, Embassy Services Private Limited. Mitesh oversees the operations of company's non-captive business comprising over 50 million square feet of area across 10 states pan-India. He's an employee and customer experience specialist with over 25 years of experience in corporate real estate, outsourcing, and hospitality industries, with a proven successful track record of achieving success within startups, turnaround, and rapid change environments. So this is our eminent panel, and Mr. Agarwal, I hand it over to you now to take over the conversation.
Thank you, Sapna. Thank you, Reality Plus, for organizing and inviting all of us. On behalf of my panelists, Mitesh and Ashish, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. I just happened to log in a little bit before this session, and I heard the deep potential being spoken about in the warehousing and logistics sector. I'm reasonably certain that my co-panelists Ashish and Mitesh will agree, saying, this is a sector that's growing and it's fairly young, so it has a massive runway to before it takes off. But very quickly, without wasting much time, I'll bring in Mitesh for his 2 bits, and Ashish, you can follow, saying how's the Indian warehousing markets changed compared to a decade ago. I mean, I think that's the first thing, and then we'll talk about services and customization in this sector. So
thank you, Shobhit, for that. So thank you for inviting me in first, and thank you, Sapna. Interesting question, Shobhit. So I've been around with this with the real estate outsourcing industry for 2 decades now, right? I think the fastest growth, the fastest maturity I've seen possibly is the warehousing sector. The way it's actually exploded, I would say, from not just organized players coming in, but the way the sector itself is picking up pace, the government initiatives, everything else. I think it's a massive change. In my experience, I think it's not just about the grade A players coming into space, but it's also about the amount of client interaction, interface, and impetus coming into that sector. When I talk about the larger firms like the Amazons, the Flipkarts, the Mintras of the world, and along with these startup environments coming in, I think they're all compelling us to push this growth into a very organized way. Like you said, I heard the last participant saying there are lots of challenges in the sector, but at the same time, I see the growth potential is extremely large, moving from from basic warehousing, like you used to hear about outskirts of cities, to actually looking at a potential of 6PL coming in sometime in the country is a very, very interesting journey. I think the other part I'm seeing across is that the way it's growing into tier 2, tier 3 cities. People are just catching on and saying, and especially this whole 10-minute warehousing story, right? I want everything in 10 minutes, the whole in-city warehousing piece. So I think the diversity this vertical has got, and the speed at which it's growing, and the efficacy it demands, are 3 things for me which I have not seen in any other industry in 10 years achieving this size and scale. That's my 2 bits on that whole concept.
No, very well put, saying fastest growing and fastest to change, both in terms of supply and demand. The way demand has changed also is amazing. And I like your point saying, we always keep focusing about tier 1 in other sectors, This is one sector that's going into tier 2 and tier 3, which is larger to, which is closer to the consumption center. So it's not about tier 1 versus tier 2. It's more about consumption. Ashish, you are from the leasing side, and of course, you've seen investment world as well. What are your uh, two bits on this industry per se?
Yeah. So thanks for that question, and hello everybody. Look, I'm only 8-9 months into warehousing. My experience is in other asset classes, but it's like a rapid learning curve. So what, from when I speak with clients, I think they talk about, from the journey is from go down to warehouse in the last 10 years. So when we say go down, it's just a shed, just no quality, very, very low, low importance to safety, environment, and what have you. And, nothing else matters as long as they block the space. Now we are going, slightly beyond the building, now going deeper in today's world where the warehouse is a living being. And it's an active part of the supply chain rather than just a dead sort of storage area. And a lot of it, we are seeing that it will move towards a more distribution center approach, where all our clients will go into futuristic things like how do we optimize storage, how do we measure efficiency, how do we go with a higher throughput. So look, it's exciting, where your client is actually leading from the front. It's very exciting, and they are growing significantly, and it's a huge catch up that folks like us need to do, Shobhit.
Superb. And I'm actually relatively saying I'm very pleased that this conversation, I have two people who've done more offices than warehouse, and you're not putting your dollars in, so we're not crying about approvals and land disaggregation. So I'm really happy because you guys will be able to comment on the services side and how does this differ from plain vanilla office, right? Because office is now sort of in stable state. People know what you need to do. People have done it for over 2 decades. It's absolutely measurable. But when you do warehousing, it's a one thing is that it's extremely cost conscious, and second, they want service levels as if it was a grade A office. So Mitesh, how do you solve this dilemma that you want to pay nothing but you want everything from a services perspective, and nobody better than you to explain this?
Shobhit, if I had honestly an answer to that question, I would be a billionaire probably today. Because I've got all my customers asking exactly the same thing, saying we want to pay cents on the dollar, literally, and we want the Taj Mahal right next to it, right? So I think it's an interesting quandary, but you kind of hit the nail on the head. This industry is literally come out of nowhere, like I mentioned, and with the whole, I would call it the whole appeasement part of the end consumer really taking technology and wanting everything right away. The whole consumption philosophy which is driving this industry is actually also driving our end users and our developers and the companies, the e-commerce companies, actually to come back and say, like you said, focus on the fact first saying how compliant are we? How are really we focusing on the government compliances, the employee compliances, the buildings and making sure they're safe. I think especially post-pandemic, everybody's really come in a big way on saying, are we compliant and are we safe? That's the first interesting part. We're seeing a dynamic change around that part. And the interesting part again I've seen there is that companies are now consciously willing to invest in that part, which earlier was something you would ignore and get away and say, okay, it's not really a big piece, has suddenly become prima facie end game. I think the other part which is getting more interesting is around how do we ensure that this whole space, because of the transition from local to grade A spaces, also gets a very strong quality consciousness around service levels itself. And I start right from the building quality itself, from designing the right building, making sure it has got the imperatives of sustainability being built in, and also integrity in terms of the building itself. In terms of services, how was the floor loading calculations, how strong resilient is it, how's the power backup situation, and stuff like that. And then, interestingly, even moving on to the part of saying, how do we take care of the drivers and cleaners who visit us? How do we take care of the loaders experience who visit this place? Because finally they are driving this whole industry forward. And that's where I find that I think the interesting part, of course, is on cost. That's a huge dynamic because everybody, right from the Flipkarts to the Amazons, are very focused on saying, how do I push that last cent of cost out of this whole equation? But they're also cognitively realizing the fact, saying that the warehouse has to be a social engagement space. It has to be a space where you have the deliveries happening, but along with that, there's a clear focus on service quality. And I think the biggest interesting part in this model is that your end consumer, and literally the end consumer using the warehouse, is typically somebody who's coming from the lower strata of the economy. He's saying somebody who's not used to a great place to work. He doesn't really understand what's a great place to work in. He looks at it and says, yeah, I just need to come and work this space out and go back home. And also it is floating population. So I think that is the part we're trying to work with our customers and like saying, how do we educate those guys and the companies to say, how do we take care of them? And really build a whole service function around that aspect. It'll not be the cheapest. I can obviously assure you that part, but we are focusing on really value for money and really focusing on the whole ESG aspect of saying it's environmental, it's very, very strongly societal, right? Because that's a huge part of this whole industry is going to be look around that. And then of course the governance piece. So I think from that path is where we are building up that whole value chain perspective and saying cheap is not the best. And the best is not may not be what this industry needs, like you said, compared to a hotel or an office as such. But we need to figure out the value paradigm very clear and come back to the strong, good offering, which makes sense to every stakeholder in that space. So that's my concise understanding of where this piece is. And like Ashish said, I've actually joined, I rather got used to warehousing only a few months ago, but I'm finding it to be an extremely interesting space to operate into. Because like I said, traditionally, our focus always was the office spaces and all those good old spaces to be in, but this is really coming up really fast.
Absolutely, Mitesh. And one of my experiences is that more offices are more designed for blue collared, but this is more white collared workers as a proportion of the users, right? So their
True.
expectation is very, very different. And, obviously to please them and you've put it like rightly, you have to educate them to say, this is what you should expect. Otherwise, the expectations
Absolutely.
will go out of whack. Um, Ashish, let me put this differently. I think the panel before me and in long drawn words said that we need to institutionalize. I think this sector has skipped one level of development. So from being fragmented, as you said, go down to grade A warehouse, I think is jumped multiple levels. Right? It wasn't a paradigm shift. I think Mitesh said it in different ways, saying in a decade we have seen this change. I will just go back to my sort of earlier days. Then when we started to see grade A office buildings, people spoke about green buildings. Then there's somebody said carbon footprint. So we said, "Acha, ye bhi koi nayi cheez aayi hai, to carbon footprint kam karna hai." I think warehouse have brought in this whole ESG concept, right?
True.
So they've added some sort of a science to it, saying, "Look, green is okay, platinum rated is fine, but now we want to talk about real ESG." Right.
Yeah.
And in my view, that's changing the concept of service also. So can you just educate saying what's the difference between green and platinum, Ashish, versus ESG compliant warehouse?
Yeah, so look, one is the regulatory aspect and the expectation from occupiers. And, in many ways, a lot of people who are doing it, and, kudos to them, are also doing it from a compliance standpoint, get those requisite number of points, qualify for a LEED Gold or a LEED Platinum or an IGBC. But I think our presence in 10 markets across Southeast Asia and Australia, has, given us a sort of a fairly fast track of what we all of us need to do. One of the first things that we did almost 3 years ago is, making sure that everybody in our company is aware of and is conscious about, so it starts at the individual level of not using plastic, for example. So our offices across the world don't have, plastic bottles, so to speak. So it pretty much started there. Then it's now gone on to warehouse design, where, sustainability is a conscious effort. And let me give you an example. When we build warehouses, it's on lean construction. What it means is that a lot of construction activity is off-site. So, for example, our foundation are precast, the warehouse is prefab. and PEB. So what it does is that, the whole amount of pollution, the soil contamination, all those issues are, made sure, not just from a cost and efficiency of timeline delivery perspective, but also from an ESG standpoint. So, it is cheaper for us to build it by 100 rupees a square foot at site, but we do it off site. One of our key reason is to save the land and the environment around it. So there's even lesser emission. The other, of course, is solar, biodiversity. I'll give you an example. We planted about 6 months ago something called mini forest, Miyawaki forests. And we're so happy that they've actually become more than 7 feet tall in just 6 months. So the greenery suddenly sprung up even in this tough weather in one of our projects in NCR. So clearly, you have to invest. Those trees don't come cheap, but the results are outstanding even in 7 months. And we've got great feedback on it. The last point you mentioned about is carbon footprint. A lot of it is board talk, but we are so pleased that one of our parks in Chennai, we've actually got measures in which we monitor air quality, water, energy, STP on real-time basis. And that's something which is easily available. And we are, honestly tracking that. Just around last month is when we start capturing it. And it gives us enough data point over time, over the next 3 to 5 years. We pretty much know what we are doing and what is the quantum of stuff that we need to offset with. And hopefully when India starts carbon trading, we'll probably there. How big, we don't know, but some of these things will count. We feel not just as a responsible corporate citizen, trying to maximize the opportunity that we've been talking about, but also making sure we're not harming the environment. And when the government comes up with a framework on carbon credits, we're pretty keen that space also becomes interesting for us. Shobhit.
Thank you, Ashish. I didn't realize that you're planting mini forest, and
yeah,
measuring and producing solar panels and solar energy. Mitesh, one quick question on this. I think in offices, while you do the services, one of the outcome from a consumer perspective is there are these surveys about how good the workplace is, how happy you are, the good workplaces to measure. So what's the measure on warehousing side except being platinum and ESG? And second, I think what Ashish also alluded to is saying, because these are now being new built and we don't have baggage because we're going from godowns to warehouses, you're using a lot of tech, right? You can't measure emissions, you can't measure pollution, because at the time office buildings were being built 10 years ago, these devices were not there. So how important is use of technology, first on the building side, and then we'll talk about services side as well?
Of course, Shobhit, so I think technology definitely plays a huge role in our whole piece, like Ashish mentioned, right from making sure that we are, hopefully as much as reducing carbon footprint at the time of the building itself, and then moving on to, the operation space. I think the whole e-commerce drive is pushing us to migrate from a traditional humanistic approach only to actually having a convergence of the man, the machine, and the technology aspect coming in, and distinguishing all three aspects very, very interestingly. Because to me, these are very confluent topics. People cannot, machines cannot take away what people are doing today. I think that aspect is really important, especially for a socially conscious economy like India. We kind of, is that balance around. What's interesting for me also is the fact we, as a country, we are leapfrogging machines and moving to technology aspect and very easily, comfortably working with that whole piece. So we are actually trying to work out that how does this whole confluence work through for us, for our end customers, and also for the users of the place to understand how this dynamic really will affect them, because it has a huge effect on productivity and efficacy both. It will also have an effect on how we can control, like Ashish mentioned, the whole amount of the carbon footprint that we've got. The other aspect which we also are saying, so today if you ask me, we don't have a defined measurement standard which is accepted as a norm. But I think the interesting part is that society itself and people themselves are actually driving us to push those standards in place as soon as possible. Because I think, to me, my last visit to a client managed warehouse, a few actually employees came in and said, "How safe is the water?" And we said, "Well, you can actually text me because I can drink it in front of you if that's the measurement standard you want me to ascribe. Because if I show you a laboratory report, you might turn around and tell me, I don't really believe it. Because how genuine is that?" And I also realized my own mind saying that these people coming from a small catchment area close to the warehouse, right? They're very much look, not touch and feel. They really believe what they can see, and for them, that's the biggest measurement of that part. But what was interesting to me, I realized, was that these people also are coming across and getting concerned about how that impacts on themselves, on their environment, and at the same time, the social economic fabric of that total area. They're very happy with the jobs being created, but they are also very cognizant saying, how do you expect me to improve my standard of living? How do I expect me to come back and improve my social standing across the these parts? They're very happy saying I work with so and so company which has a warehouse here, but also saying at some point I like my own workspace to become better and more. How do I say this? More feeling up compared to like an office. Like the way we pridefully say I work in a platinum office, they don't really know the meaning of a platinum office today. But trust me, they're very much on the ball saying, "Is my office nice, safe, and a great place to work?" They may not say it in those many words, but that intent comes across like. So our challenge, if you ask me, is like I said, is to balance those pieces out, but also come back and tell them that we are here along with with the warehouse developer and with the end user to take care. We're going to give you a space which you're proud to work in, a space you pridefully call your own, and you actually want to come back and refer more people to work back. Because our biggest challenge in industry also is talent. Getting in good trained people to work in this industry, because it's a very labor intensive industry and it needs a lot of formative training to get them to use it in an efficient way. Is our challenge to get into that. So it's definitely a very interesting experience to be part of.
Yeah. So Mitesh, simply put, what you're saying is because your work is not very different from one building to the other, the environment makes a huge difference. The happiness or
Absolutely.
the satisfaction comes in from feeling that difference. That means the
True.
service plus the condition of the building, the condition of the work is actually physically felt, and therefore people want to come back to one certain warehouse building and work there rather than work somewhere else in these go down.
Absolutely, Shobhit.
Oh, I mean, I didn't realize when you said it, but it does sound like a good reason to build good warehouses and better warehouses. Um, Ashish, in your opening remarks, you had said, people have now started to worry about, they're moving to the next level. So ESG is one of them, but you're now saying, look, services in warehouses also need to be measured by client's productivity. How much can he save? How quickly can he deliver, etc., etc. So, what are some of the measures that you are putting in, Ashish, as your company saying, are you building taller? Are you building faster? What are you doing to increase this productivity?
Yeah. So look, our clients are looking at folks like us for certainty, certainty of quality and certainty of timely deliverableness. So clearly, our focus is on making sure that quality and the way we've changed the way we approach development is we spent on almost 2 months planning warehouse and the estate before hitting the site. So let's say we do a transaction and it's a BTS. We have fairly detailed workshops with our clients, and we budget everything into a common BOQ, and then we unleash ourselves in terms of ordering the PB based on the design and prefab foundations, making sure that everything gets delivered. So let me give you an example. We are able to make commitments in the market for delivering warehouse from nothing at site to about 5.5 months. And this warehouse is almost 500,000 square feet. So what that means is that it's a huge economic transaction being done and delivered in such a short time. Now, that is what clients are seeking. The other thing that helps us is that, you've not done a speculative build. While we do speculative build, but, so there's no idling anywhere. There's no inefficiency in the system anywhere. And that's what clients appreciate. The other thing is is quality. Now, because a lot of our work is prefab, the results are outstanding in terms of consistency of quality. We have created sort of fallback in terms of 2 or 3 PEB contractors. So far we haven't had those kind of encounters yet. So, our focus is quite simple: to make warehouses in shapes that our clients can put the racks in efficiently. The lighting, firefighting, and fire safety of people is planned at the very outset, not just in accordance with the local norms, but also genuinely making sure people are safe. All that is achieved by just being very, very well integrated in the client's fit out process and design process before that. A lot of internal planning, Shobhit, is with the client. So, for example, we have built fairly tall warehouses, but we've also been asked by very sophisticated occupiers saying, Ashish, why are you making your warehouses so tall? Because you're wasting so much volume. Because currently there is only handful, or probably you can count on single hand, occupiers who can take very tall warehouses, because there are no MHE cranes that can go all the way up to level 6 and do justice to it. So our response is that, look, we're making our warehouses future proof. We've also built something for a large e-com player in Bangalore, where they have automated processing, and there are conveyor belts going fairly high up. So given that our warehouses are built for a fairly long period of time, we want to make sure that they are relevant even in those times. So in many ways, some of the work is over engineering, and client gets the benefit of it straight away. Shobhit.
Ashish, excellent. So what you're saying is that you can put up 500,000 square feet in under 6 months.
Yeah.
A lot of the work is actually prefabricated, pre-designed,
yeah.
pre-engineered. So quality is in place.
Yeah.
You guys are sensitive about health, safety of the workers, the quality of air, water, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And you can do all of this. Now, basic fundamental, I think you've said everything that a real estate company should do. But in typical real estate, location is everything.
Yeah.
Now, how important is location in context of warehousing, where a trucker has driven 900 kilometers 3 nights and has to reach your warehouse? How much difference does it make if your warehouse is 10 kilometers out or in?
Yeah.
Or 5 kilometers on the side of a road?
Yeah.
How much of a difference does it make, and how critical is it from a delivery perspective? What's going on? I mean, how do you make location selection?
Basically, we are going for land, consolidated land. Let me be brutally honest. All that stuff will fall into place once we've acquired the land, in terms of making sure the drivers have adequate places to rest, wash up, and everything, and have access to quality food at cheap prices. That's the easy part, I think.
You're saying services for the truckers,
Yeah.
It's like you providing them hospitality. For office, it's like putting up a 5-star hotel. You put up something for your workers or truckers, etc., etc.
Yeah, look, I think that's something which is an evolving space, and I think all of us can do better. But the whole thing is that the price points are so lower. The other challenge I'll explain. Let me tell you a practical problem. I was speaking to a trucker, and he said, what do you like in a canteen in the estate? And he said, yeah, sure, but can't be very far. I'll probably be my lorry should be in my line of sight, because there are a lot of pilferages. One driver or a helper, a cleaner will nick something or a fuel from somewhere else. So they've got fundamental issues which unfortunately we can't solve. So all they need is a good place to sleep and relatively cheaper food. And surprisingly, actually, they cook just outside their lorries or inside the lorries. They carry their own small stuff and what have you. And their cost is fairly cheap. So, sorry, I'm digressing, but your question is really on what do we look in a location. I think our clients are looking at clusters, where locations are validated by other people, competitors, because a big fraction of our clients are third-party logistics players who are in turn competing for business. So the 3PLs are competing for business, and so all these 3PLs will look for locations which are something amenable to everybody. So consolidated land near clusters is what we are after, and lands which we are quick to execute. So no point where there are contours and we have to do a huge amount of filling or layering.
Yes. So Ashish, you're saying clustering helps. So you create a marketplace. It doesn't matter whether it's 5 kilometers in or 5 kilometers out. As long as there is a clustering effect, you think work will happen. Our topic was more around value adds and services. I want one last question because I know I'm conscious of time, and I'm going to put it to Mitesh. How's the service landscape coming up, and how is it adding value to industrial segment?
Interesting topic. So I think there's a lot of maturity in this segment. I think we are just scratching the fringe, if you ask me today. And I say this from a point of view of three aspects really: the whole service design, compliances, and also experiences. This segment still needs that. This actually gets underpinned by the whole cost aspect, like you mentioned right at the starting of your conversation. You said, and that's the biggest part, right? We need to make sure we are fitting not just the compliant parts of it, but also of an experience which is value for money. That's a puzzle we're still trying to solve across. I think the easiest answer would have been saying make it cheaper and make it L1. I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer lies around creating an industry awareness on all the three parts to be: the developers, the end users, and the service providers, and then coming across to the confluencing model which addresses the needs of all three. Because finally, this whole industry is built on scale, it's built on the right amount of pricing and the right amount of services, and the last part being efficiency. So I think that's the part which still needs a lot of fine tuning. I think the good part is that with the whole technology aspect, I think we are getting there. And I think the last most important part is the whole government regulatory landscape changing and making it more employee friendly. Hopefully, this new wage code that are coming in would help us get around the point where it becomes more integrated. Otherwise, it'll just take across at a cost perspective, which may not be the right way to look at it.
Thanks, Mitesh. So really my takeaway is that you're saying buildings, work environment, ESG is all taken care of. It can be probably taken care by design, but services will need to work around. And the only way to do is to democratize this is through technology. Otherwise, you can't deliver it at the cost that they want. Obviously, you can't have so much manpower, which is there in grade A office buildings. You dial for everything. So all services are dial away, but you can't do that for warehouse. So you're saying technology is the only alternative to providing good quality services other than education, right? Which
absolutely
is critical, right? Which is critical because this is straight to the roots, and many of the people working here are white collared, and perhaps also need to be handheld, saying how to use these facilities. Swapna will like to probably sort of end, given that 6 and that's our time. And I would like to thank Ashish and Mitesh for taking all my difficult questions and for very, very valuable contribution to this conversation. Thank you, Mitesh. Thank you, Ashish. Sapna, over to you.
That's right. I think there are a lot, we could have gone on and on this topic, from designing and planning of warehousing to technology and automation to regulations and, the work safety aspects of it. But Shobhit, how are you looking at this sector? What is your reading of warehousing?
So I think from where I'm seeing, I'm more evolved on the capital market side. I think this is one sector that is flush with more money that it can consume. It is also the other thing good about this sector. It's that it's creating employment where it's most needed. Office buildings, to work in office buildings, you have to go to the office. Here, the work is actually going to villages or near the villages and actually providing an upheaval and uplift of quality of life to those living around these warehouses. So I'm very, very fond of this sector for that reason. And I think what it requires, and although we didn't speak much about it on our panel because it was working around services, but what's required in my view to use the money that's available is land digitization records, so that it makes it easier for people to aggregate and assimilate land. That's one of the biggest raw material. And second is simplification of rules, so that while Ashish can build the building in 5.5 months, he needs to get approval in 1 month. Otherwise, it'll take him 12 months to get approval and only 5.5 to build. So I guess they need to solve all of this. Land is the big issue in this, and capital. In most cases, capital is in short supply. In this case, capital is zero short supply of capital. So it's a blessed sector.
That's right. It's this sector is still in nascent stages. A lot of big ticket, developments need to come up. And as you rightly said, and in fact, one of the speakers also mentioned, the supply chain is dependent on warehousing, and the economy is dependent on the supply chains. And when we have warehousing in tier 2 cities and industrial cities, we grow the economy of those cities, again create demand for e-commerce, and it's a full cycle of development in economy and need of warehousing. And like Shobhit, you rightly mentioned about digitization of land records. I think that is the biggest value added service that any client would require. And then the approvals need to be in place for developers like Ashish to build the structure in record time. One question that has come is, what is the kind of customization clients are asking? Ashish, that goes to you. Is a certain kind of customization depending upon their operations that come to you?
Yeah, each customer, I mean, colloquially, they have very unique requirements. So, but it's within the realm of something which is acceptable. So let me give example. Someone may need more mezzanine. Someone may need partitions because they are going to house 2 different clients in it. So the partition, it's easier said than done. So when you partition it, what do you make the partition with? So you have to plan that. Then one customer has operations 24/7. So he needs his electric panel different. And the other one switches off lights after 8 p.m. So he needs another electric panel. Our estate services are obviously planned much in advance before these customers come. So there is an additional investment that is needed for pulling the cables, pulling the pipes from our main infrastructure spine to all these places. So that's one level of fundamental thing we ought to do anyway. The others are really in terms of matching lighting with their rack layout so that there are no shadows. Recently, someone has come up with an additional requirement for making a canteen and a training room. So just an expansion of a mezzanine area. Some of the guys have asked for future. They may actually make the whole warehouse air conditioned. So are there provisions for higher energy and places to stock the chiller plants on HVAC? So each of them have that, and I think the lessons we've learned from other countries where we are present is really leave some space aside for some of these future-proof initiatives that the client may themselves want. They may not need it now, but we need to leave some provisions there. So we're able to offer some of these things to our customers.
Okay, so not only customization, but also keeping provisions for future if there is a future requirement from an occupier. Mitesh, in terms of services, warehouses also, as Ashish also said, that they are different. Some could be smart warehousing where everything is automated, like Amazon fulfillment center, or they could be smaller distribution center for a local company. So how do services change for, depending upon the size and character of a warehouse?
Great point, Sapna. So you're actually seeing a lot of dynamics coming around. Like the first point Shobhit raised about location, that has a huge impact on the availability of people and the right kind of people. And then I think the impact is around what level of automation is the client already doing that segment, right? Because it's an interesting segment, part, because it's a very employee-friendly industry and needs a lot of employment generation also. So we're seeing those two critical parts need to get factored in, saying first location, then how much is the automation levels sitting at. And I think the third part crucially is around, like Shobhit mentioned also, what is the cost dynamic they're looking at. So depending on the kind of end user occupant coming across the place, the kind of developer who's sitting there, we're seeing both all these three reasons kind of mixing up and then coming back with the very customized solution back then. So there's no one size fit all. And unlike offices, there's a lot of variation today in terms of service levels that we are seeing. So we're still trying to get that customization built back in.
Okay, so customization as per the requirement and the size and character of the space, as well as the cost factor which comes into picture.
And the location, absolutely.
And location, definitely. So Shobhit, before we end this panel, your future outlook, because you are coming from the capital markets, we want your future outlook for this sector. What do you have to say, listening to the kind of customization that developers are providing, the services, value additions, the service providers are providing? How do you see the future of this sector?
Absolutely,
are we there with the global sector, the warehousing sector?
So this sector, as I started by saying last time, is capital intensive and there's surplus of capital, and it's in the hand of only international developers, right? So our warehouses are very similar to what's being produced in the rest of the world. So I'm less worried about quality. I think more and more warehouses that we are building are towards what meets international requirements because the products that are being stored in there are similar, right? Now you spoke a lot about customization, but it's also about what you are storing, how you are delivering, where it is to be delivered, right? And the last 2 years or 2.5 years, we've seen structural change in the way delivery is expected or done, right? So somebody spoke about last mile delivery in 10 minutes, delivery in 30 minutes. So the whole chain is getting revalued. And I'd said this in one of our previous conferences that, earlier delivery was expected from the store. Now the delivery to home is directly from the warehouse in many cases. So the supply chain itself is reorganizing and it will continue to reorganize. I'm very, very positive about this sector, that this sector will not only sit 40 kilometers out of the city, it will keep coming closer to bridge that gap of delivery, and we'll break it down into big boxes, smaller boxes, and ultimately like a room near the city. So I think there's a massive play in reorganizing the sector, and it requires a lot of money and capital and
which is already there, as you said. The money is
there. but it requires still a lot of work and like I said, technology to enable good quality service.
So money is there, institutional players are there, and it's a very dynamic space. We will see a lot of new models coming up, lot of new services or value additions coming up in this sector. So thank you for that very wonderful conversation. We did touch upon a lot of aspects, and probably we can talk on them in detail, in some other panel that we will have. But thank you so much, Ashish, for giving us perspective as a developer, and Mr. Mitesh Kaul as a service provider, for this sector. Thank you so much, and Shobhit for wonderfully bringing out those comments from our speakers, those perspectives from our speakers, and sharing your own view about what this sector looks like and its growth opportunities. Thank you so much, our panel
members.
Sapna.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sapna.
Thank you, Sapna.
Thanks, Shobhit.
Thank you.
And
bye,
let me thank all our speakers of the day as well for making this very first edition of Realty Plus Warehousing Leadership Convergence 2022, so exciting and thought-provoking. We have ended this conclave on a very positive note. So let me also thank you, the awesome audience, for being here with us today and sharing their queries. We wish you all good health and well-being. But before we say goodbye, let me remind you all that along with it, our online webinars, Realty Plus has now started its on-ground events, and our upcoming event will be held shortly in June in the city of Ahmedabad. And we look forward to seeing you all very soon and connecting in person. But till then, thank you and God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.